Before we begin, I want to take a moment to honor the cultures behind the stories we are about to explore. The tales shared here come from many peoples, lands, and traditions. I do not change these stories to fit modern expectations or to align with today's social standards. Instead, I present them as they were told, sometimes beautiful, sometimes harsh, sometimes challenging. We are not here to judge the past, but to understand it, to listen, to learn, and to honor the ancestors who carried these stories forward. We also share stories from various religious traditions. These are presented in their historical and spiritual context, with respect for their beliefs that they represent. Every culture deserves respect, context, and acknowledgement, and this space is dedicated to doing exactly that. Story 1: The Rainbow Covenant. When the rain finally ceased, the world stood strangely silent. The roaring waters that had covered mountains and valleys slowly withdrew into the rivers and seas, revealing an earth unlike the one that had disappeared beneath the storm. Forests dripped beneath the returning sunlight. Fresh streams carved new paths through softened ground. The air carried the scent of wet soil and new beginnings. From the great ark stepped Noah, his family, and every living creature entrusted to his care. Before building homes or planting fields, Noah first built an altar of thanksgiving. The ancient Hebrew tradition remembers that as the offering rose toward heaven, God declared that the relationship between the Creator and creation had entered a new chapter. Though humanity would continue to struggle with weakness and failure, the earth itself would no longer again be destroyed by a flood that covered all living things. Then came a sign unlike any the world had ever known. Sunlight broke through the departing clouds, and across the heavens stretched a radiant rainbow, arching from one horizon to the other. In the book of Genesis, God declared that this bow would become the everlasting sign of a covenant, a sacred promise established not only with Noah, but with his descendants, every living creature, and the earth itself. Each time storm clouds gathered and sunlight pierced the rain, the rainbow would stand as a reminder that mercy had followed judgment and hope had followed despair. Unlike agreements made between earthly rulers, the covenant asked for no payment, tribute, or bargain in return. It was freely given. The changing seasons would continue. Seed time and harvest would return. Summer and winter, day and night, would endure as enduring rhythms woven into creation itself. Humanity was entrusted once again with the care of the living world, while the Creator pledged faithfulness to the work of his own hands. Through the centuries, the rainbow became one of humanity's most beloved symbols because it united two seemingly opposite realities. It appeared only after the storm had spent its strength. It was born where rain still lingered while sunlight already returned. It reminded generations that judgment was never intended to become the final chapter of creation's story. Beyond every season of correction waited the possibility of restored relationship. Beyond every flood lay dry ground. Beyond every dark horizon, light quietly returned. The ancient Hebrews therefore remembered the rainbow not merely as a beautiful phenomenon in the sky, but as a living reminder that the bond between heaven and earth had not been abandoned. Even after humanity's greatest failures, the Creator chose to remain committed to the flourishing of life. Every rainbow became an invitation to remember that while storms may reshape the world, faithfulness is what allows it to begin again. Story 2: Enlil's reprieve. When the great flood had finally withdrawn and the last storm clouds disappeared beyond the horizon, the world lay hushed beneath a sky that seemed almost unfamiliar. The roaring rivers returned to their banks, fresh reeds emerged from the marshes, and sunlight warmed an earth washed clean by the waters. Upon the slopes where the great vessel had come to rest, Utnapishtim stepped onto dry ground and prepared an offering of gratitude. He gathered fragrant woods, kindled a sacred fire, and lifted his thanksgiving toward the heavens. As the sweet smoke rose into the clean air, the gods decided to receive the sacrifice, drawn by its fragrance after the silence that had followed the flood. Yet among them stood Enlil, mighty lord of wind, storms, and kingship, whose decree had brought the waters upon the earth. When he discovered that human life had endured despite the flood, his anger flared, believing his command had not been fully carried out. But Ea, also known as Enki, the wise god of fresh waters and protector of humanity, stepped forward to speak. With calm wisdom, he questioned whether complete destruction had truly been necessary. If humanity strayed, could famine not teach restraint? Could sickness not humble the proud? Must every living creature perish for the failures of many? Ea reminded Enlil that justice without wisdom becomes destruction, while wisdom seeks restoration wherever it can. The great Lord listened. His anger slowly gave way to understanding. Standing before Utnapishtim and his wife, Enlil did something unexpected. Rather than renewing judgment, he bestowed blessing. He placed his hands upon them and declared that they would no longer live as ordinary mortals. Instead, they would be granted eternal life and dwell at the farthest reaches of the world, where rivers met the sea, becoming living witnesses to both the world that had been lost and the one that had begun anew. The flood had ended not with endless wrath, but with reconciliation. The gods and humanity would move forward together in another age. In the centuries that followed, Mesopotamian storytellers remembered this moment as one of profound transformation. The relationship between heaven and earth had been wounded, yet it had not been abandoned. Even the divine council could move from judgment toward mercy when wisdom prevailed. Utnapishtim's immortality became more than a reward of survival. It stood as a lasting reminder that after correction comes covenant, after justice comes compassion, and after the storm comes a possibility of peace. The world had not simply been spared, it had been entrusted with another beginning. Story 3: The Covenant of the Fifth Sun. The ancient Aztecs believed that the world in which they lived was not the first creation, but the fifth. Before their own age, 4 earlier worlds had risen into existence and passed away, each ending in catastrophe as the balance of the cosmos was broken. One world belonged to jaguars, another ended beneath mighty winds. A third was consumed by fire, a fourth disappeared beneath overwhelming waters. Each age eventually reached its appointed end, and the universe stood once again in darkness, waiting for life to begin anew. At the sacred city of Teotihuacan, the gods gathered around a great fire to decide who would become the new sun and restore light to creation. 2 stepped forward. The first was Tekusis Tecatl, wealthy, adorned with jewels, and confident that such an honor belonged to him. The second was Nana Watsin, a humble deity marked by illness and covered in sores, possessing neither beauty nor riches. When the moment came to leap into the blazing fire, Tecatl hesitated again and again, shrinking back from the unbearable heat. When Nana Watsin, though fearful, closed his eyes, he threw himself into the flames without hesitation. Instantly, brilliant light burst across the heavens as he emerged transformed into a radiant sun. Ashamed, Tecatl followed after him and also became a shining celestial body, later remembered as the moon. Yet the newly born sun remained motionless upon the horizon. Light had returned, but the heavens themselves would not move. Day refused to begin. The universe waited in perfect stillness. Then the assembled gods understood the final truth. The world could not continue through the sacrifice of one alone. Each of them would have to offer their own lives so that the sun might cross the sky and time itself could begin again. One by one, the gods surrendered themselves, their sacred offering becoming the force that set the heavens into motion. The sun rose, the stars followed their appointed paths. Winds stirred, rivers flowed, seasons returned. The fifth sun began its journey across the sky, not through domination, but through shared sacrifice. Humanity entered its renewed world, believing they lived with a sacred covenant. The gods had poured out their own divine life so creation could continue, and in return, humanity was called to live with reverence, gratitude, and offerings that honored the ongoing balance of the cosmos. To the Aztecs, every sunrise became a reminder that existence itself rested upon a relationship of mutual responsibility between heaven and earth. The universe endured because promises were continually renewed. The greatest covenant was not written upon stone or parchment, but across the sky itself, where each dawn proclaimed that creation had once again been entrusted to another day. Story 4: Tangaroa Calms the Seas. Across the endless blue of the Pacific Ocean, where islands rise like emerald crowns from waters that seem to stretch beyond the edge of the world, the Polynesian peoples came to know the sea not as an empty wilderness, but as a living realm filled with purpose, ancestry, and divine presence. Every voyage depended upon reading the stars, understanding the winds, and honoring the waters that sustain life itself. Among these great powers was Tangaroa, revered across many Polynesian traditions as the mighty lord of the sea and the father of countless creations that filled its depths. Though his stories differ from island to island, many remember a time when the world itself struggled to find harmony. The boundaries between sea, sky, and land were unsettled. Storms rose without warning, great waves swallowed coastlines. The forces of creation seemed to contend with one another, each magnificent in strength, but lacking the balance that allows life to flourish. In some traditions, rivalries among the divine powers disturbed the natural order. In others, the separation of Rongi, the Sky Father, and Papa, the Earth Mother, reshaped the cosmos and required every realm to discover its rightful place. Through these ancient memories runs a common truth. Creation could not remain in conflict forever. Order would come only when each power accepted its purpose within the greater whole. Tangaroa embraced that calling. Rather than allowing the seas to remain wild beyond measure, he became their guardian and ruler, guiding the tides, filling the oceans with life, and establishing the rhythms upon which voyagers, fishermen, and entire islands, nations would depend. The crashing surf became a heartbeat instead of a threat. The tides arrived with dependable faithfulness. Fish returned to coral reefs. Canoes once again crossed immense distances guided by stars, reflected upon peaceful waters. Humanity learned that the sea was never something to conquer. It was a relationship to honor. Those who treated the ocean with humility, gratitude, and respect found themselves carried safely across its vastness, while those who ignored its sacred nature quickly discovered how small they truly were beneath the horizon. For generations, the sea itself became a living covenant between heaven, earth, and humanity. Every tide returning to shore testified that order still endured. Every migration of whales, every school of fish, and every sunrise glimmering across the waves reminded the island people that creation remains stable when every part fulfills the role entrusted to it. Tangaroa's greatest gift was not simply dominion over the waters. It was the restoration of harmony, proving that lasting peace is found not when one force overpowers another, but when every part of creation moves together in balance. In that enduring rhythm, the Pacific became more than an ocean. It became a promise renewed with every wave that kissed the shore. Daily Thread for July 25th, The Covenant. For the past several days, the ancient stories have led us through silence, correction, and renewal. Today, they remind us that the deepest purpose of every new beginning is relationship restored. As the floodwaters receded, Noah stepped into a world washed clean, where a rainbow stretched across the heavens as a lasting covenant between the Creator, humanity, every living creature, and the earth itself. In ancient Mesopotamia, Enlil laid aside his anger as Ea's wisdom prevailed, transforming judgment into reconciliation and allowing a renewed relationship between the gods and humankind to begin. The Aztecs remembered that the fifth sun did not rise through power alone, but through the willing self-offering of the gods, whose sacrifice established a sacred covenant that allowed creation itself to continue. Across the vast Pacific, the stories of Tangaroa taught that harmony is renewed whenever the sea, the sky, the land, and humanity each honor the place entrusted to them within the living order of creation. Though these traditions speak with different voices, they arrive at a remarkably similar hope. The greatest promise is not that life will never again know storms, loss, or uncertainty. It is that relationship can be restored after even the deepest brokenness. A rainbow appears only after rain. Rivers become gentle only after the flood has passed. The rising sun follows the longest night because creation itself is woven with the possibility of beginning again. The oldest storytellers understood that covenants are more than agreements written in words. They are living promises remembered through faithful action. They are renewed each time trust is rebuilt, forgiveness is chosen, gratitude is practiced, and hope is carried forward into another generation. As tonight's fire settles into glowing embers, consider this. What promises shape the way I live? Which covenants have been entrusted to me through my family, my friendships, my faith, or my deepest convictions? And what promise might I choose today that could become a blessing for someone long after I am gone? The ancient stories remind us that civilizations are not sustained by power alone. They endure because people continue choosing faithfulness, one promise at a time.